If you think about it, back in 1938, if you wanted to broadcast a message to 1 million people, you needed, well, millions of dollars, or a massive corporate infrastructure.
Right, or the backing of a national government or something. The barriers to entry were just practically insurmountable.
Exactly. Insurmountable.
No.
Unless, of course, you were a completely penniless Franciscan friar named Maximilian Kolbe.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. So, before this hour is up, we're going to look at how a man sworn to absolute radical poverty managed to build this cutting-edge media empire that actually rivaled the biggest publishers in Europe.
It completely flips our understanding of what it means to possess something, doesn't it? Like to own nothing, but to build this massive engine of communication.
Yeah, it really does. And on that note, welcome to Daybreak. We are broadcasting straight from the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas for August 13, 2026. I'm so glad you're joining us today.
It's great to be here, and it is so good to just step away from the usual noise of the breaking headlines for a bit, isn't it? To focus on things that actually endure.
Oh, absolutely. Think of this deep dive like sharing the morning paper over coffee with good friends. And our mission today is to look at a handful of stories from a local Atchison philanthropic event to a classic mid-century BBC radio drama. And we're going to sift through them to find the common thread.
And we always need a compass for these conversations, right? A guiding question to keep us oriented when we get into the weeds of the history or the technology.
We do. And today, the question we really want you, the listener, to keep turning over in your mind as we go through these stories is a pretty heavy one. What is worth holding on to?
Which is, it's a remarkably difficult question to answer, honestly, because holding on to something implies a constant act of resistance.
Yeah, how so?
Well, it implies that there is a structural force trying to pull that thing away from you, and that simply letting go would just be the path of least resistance.
Oh, that's a great point. Letting go is easy. Holding on requires grip strength.
Exactly.
Well, let's test that idea by starting right at the foundation. We're going to look at today's gospel reading. This is Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 through 12. And we're using the Douay-Rheims translation here.
Okay, setting the stage.
Right. So the setup here is a classic, highly tense confrontation. The Pharisees approach Jesus, and they ask him a very specific question. They say, "Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause?"
We really have to pause here and look at the actual historical mechanics of the trap they're setting, because it is brilliantly engineered.
It's a trap, right? Not just a casual question.
Oh, totally a trap. In first century Judea, there was this massive, ongoing legal debate between two major rabbinic schools of thought regarding divorce. You had the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel.
Okay, break those down for us.
Sure. So Shammai basically argued that a man could only divorce his wife for something incredibly serious, like a severe moral transgression, very strict. Right. But Hillel argued for a much broader interpretation. Essentially, they allowed divorce for almost any offense. Even burning a meal could technically be grounds for it.
Wow, okay. So the Pharisees aren't just asking a polite theological question. They are dragging Jesus into a highly polarized contemporary culture war.
Precisely. It's a binary trap. If he sides with the strict interpretation of Shammai, he alienates the masses who favor Hillel's leniency.
Right.
But if he sides with Hillel, he looks morally lax to the religious elite. And hovering over all of this is the political reality of John the Baptist.
Oh, right, because he had recently been executed for speaking out against King Herod's unlawful marriage.
Exactly. So there is literal lethal danger in how Jesus answers this question about marriage and divorce laws.
Right.
It's an engineered dilemma designed to produce a scandal no matter what he says.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second. Because if we look at this from a purely modern, almost evolutionary standpoint, humans are wired for self-preservation. When a situation becomes toxic, or when a partnership is failing, our psychological instinct is to find an exit. We want an escape clause in our contracts. So why wouldn't we build an exit strategy into a relationship? Like, what is the structural benefit of the absolute permanence that Jesus is about to advocate for?
That is the exact tension Jesus addresses, and he does it by refusing the binary trap entirely.
He just steps right around it.
He really does. He doesn't take the bait to argue about the loopholes or Hillel or Shammai. He points all the way back to the original architectural design of humanity.
On blueprint.
Exactly, the blueprint. He responds, "Have you not read that he who made man from the beginning made them male and female? For this cause shall a man leave father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and they two shall be in one flesh."
He completely changes the premise.
Yeah.
They want to talk about the exit strategy, the demolition protocols for a building, and He wants to talk about the indestructible nature of the foundation itself.
Yeah.
What therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder.
And to answer your question about self-preservation and escape clauses, Jesus is elevating marriage from a mere legal contract that can be broken under certain human conditions to a metaphysical reality.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Think about it as a structural engineer would. A vow is a load-bearing mechanism. It is specifically designed to take the immense weight of future uncertainty.
I see. So if you build an escape hatch into the foundation of a skyscraper, the structural integrity is just compromised from day one.
Exactly. If you only promise to stay when things are good, or when your psychological need for comfort is being met, that's not actually a promise. That's just a description of your current mood.
Oh, wow. That's a strong way to put it.
But it's true, right?
Yeah.
The entire function of a vow is to bind you when the mood fades, when the conditions change, when the structure is under extreme stress. If the vow has an exit clause for when things get hard, it ceases to be a load-bearing structure. It cannot hold the weight of human suffering or inevitable conflict.
That makes total sense. If I walk into a lifelong commitment holding a parachute, just in case, I'm not really jumping, I'm just hovering.
Covering, yeah,
And
exactly.
I think that's the pastoral reflection for you as you listen this morning.
Oh, yeah.
We aren't bringing this up to wage some sort of cultural war or point fingers at the state of modern relationships. This is really about examining your own life.
Right.
What are the commitments, the relationships, the principles, the duties that you consider truly unbreakable? Where have you drawn a line and said, this is a prominent structure in my life, and I am holding on to it regardless of the weather?
Because maintaining a structure like that requires daily, intentional reinforcement. You don't just pour concrete once and ignore the building for 50 years. You have to actively sustain the original design.
And sometimes, sustaining that original design demands everything you have. Which brings us right to the memorial we celebrate today.
Yes, it does.
We're looking at a man who endured the ultimate structural stress test of his vows. Today is the memorial of St. Maximilian Kolbe.
A truly staggering figure in modern history. Just incredible.
Many of you probably know the defining, terrible climax of his life. Kolbe was a Polish Franciscan priest. In 1941, he was a prisoner in the Auschwitz concentration camp.
Yeah.
When a prisoner escaped, the camp commandant used this brutal mechanism of collective punishment. He ordered that 10 men be chosen at random to be starved to death in an underground bunker as retribution, and one of the men selected, Franciscan Kolbe, broke down, crying out in despair for his wife and children.
And that is the moment history pivots on a single, incomprehensible act of will.
Father Kolbe, completely voluntarily, stepped out of the line. He offered to take Kolbe's place, and the guards were so disoriented by this that they actually allowed it.
Which is unheard of.
Right. So Kolbe spent 2 weeks in that starvation bunker, and instead of madness and despair, he led the other condemned men in prayers and hymns. He brought light to the darkest possible place on earth until he was finally killed by lethal injection on August 14th.
It is a sacrifice that completely defies our normal self-preserving instincts that we were just talking about.
Completely.
It is the absolute apex of what we were exploring with the gospel, a vow of love and fidelity held onto under the most extreme, unimaginable pressure.
But I want to spend some time on the lesser-known side of Kolbe. Because before he was a martyr at Auschwitz, he was doing something that seems, well, entirely paradoxical. I mentioned it at the top, the deep dive. He was a media mogul.
This is the facet of Kolbe's life that absolutely fascinates me. We always picture him in the stark, tragic environment of the camp, but in the 1920s and 30s, Kolbe was a mechanical innovator.
A friar with printing presses.
Exactly. He was looking at the exact same mass media landscape that totalitarian regimes were using to pump out propaganda, and he realized something crucial. The technology itself is neutral. The printing press doesn't care if it prints lies or truth.
So he decides to build his own publishing apostolate. He calls it Niepokelano, which means the city of the Immaculata. But, okay, explain the mechanics of this to me. How does a Franciscan friar who has taken a vow of absolute poverty build an industrial media complex? The logistics of this just don't make any sense.
It's a brilliant workaround, honestly. The vow of poverty meant that the individual friars owned nothing. But because they consumed almost nothing, living on the absolute bare minimum of food, wearing rough habits, sleeping in unheated barracks, they could pool every single cent of donated money into the machinery.
Wait, so they literally starve themselves of comfort to feed the printing presses?
Yes, exactly. At its peak, this monastery housed over 700 friars. It was basically a self-sustaining industrial town, and they didn't just have a small hand-cranked press in a basement. They purchased the most modern, state-of-the-art rotary printing presses available in Europe.
Let's talk about the scale of this operation because the numbers are staggering.
They were publishing a daily newspaper with a circulation in the hundreds of thousands. And their flagship monthly magazine, The Night of the Immaculata, reached a circulation of 1 million subscribers in the late 1930s.
1 million subscribers. Just think about the physical supply chain required for that in 1938.
It's massive.
You aren't just hitting send on an email. You need tons of raw paper. You need vats of ink. You need railway cars to transport the finished magazines. You need a massive coordination with the Polish Postal Service. 700 guys in brown robes were running an operation that rivaled modern Amazon distribution centers in its relative complexity.
And he didn't stop at print. This is where Kolbe's engineering mindset really shines. He looked at the emerging technology of radio.
Oh, right.
He realized that a physical magazine can be stopped at a border crossing or confiscated by a guard, but a radio wave, an antenna can push a signal across heavily guarded borders, right through brick walls, directly into a family's living room.
So he applied for a broadcasting license.
He did. He set up a shortwave radio station, call sign SP3RN, right there in the friary. He was obsessing over transmitter tubes, frequency modulation, and antenna placement.
I always struggle to reconcile this. We tend to view modern technology, screens, algorithms, massive broadcasting networks as inherently alienating or secular or somehow opposed to a deep spiritual life.
And Kolbe completely rejected that dichotomy. He recognized that an antenna or a rotary press is just a highly efficient tool for an ancient job.
Just a louder megaphone.
Precisely. The mission of transmitting the truth hadn't changed since the first century. Only the amplification methods had. He understood that if you cede the airways and the printing presses to the loudest, most cynical, or most hateful voices, you are abandoning the public square. You have to broadcast the light just as aggressively and with just as much technical proficiency as others broadcast the darkness.
He was a mechanical pragmatist for the sake of the eternal. And when you look at it through that lens, his death at Auschwitz wasn't just a sudden, isolated flash of bravery.
No, not at all.
It was the logical conclusion of a life spent faithfully transmitting. He used rotary presses, he used a shortwave radio transmitter, and finally, when he was stripped of all his technology, he used his own life, his own physical body, to broadcast what he valued most.
The medium changed to the most primal level, but the message remained exactly the same.
It really makes you look at your own life differently. What is the technology you're using? Your voice, your daily work, your digital footprint, the way you speak to your neighbors. What are you broadcasting? Are you just adding to the static of the world, or are you transmitting something worth holding on to?
And the beautiful thing about that kind of active fidelity is that it isn't just an individual choice. When individuals start pooling their resources, just like those 700 friars did to buy a printing press, it scales up. A community can practice fidelity together.
Which maps perfectly onto the economic mechanics of what is happening right outside our studio windows here in Atchison today.
Yes, big day today.
Today is the All Aboard Atchison Match Day. Now, for those of you listening outside the area, this is a massive local philanthropic event. More than 60 local nonprofit organizations and charitable funds are participating. And the hook is that the community has secured a massive $150,000 in matching funds.
Let's break down the actual behavioral economics of a matching pool like this, because it is a fascinating piece of civic engineering. It's so much more than just a standard fundraiser.
Okay, so how does the mechanism actually alter donor behavior? I mean, if I want to give $20 to the animal shelter, why do I care someone else is matching it? I'm still just out $20.
Because it changes the psychological weight of your action. In behavioral economics, a matching grant lowers the perceived cost of impact.
Okay, explain that.
If you give $20 on a normal Tuesday, your impact is $20. But on match day, your $20 leverages an additional percentage from the pool. You are suddenly given a multiplier effect. It democratizes major philanthropy. It allows a school teacher or a mechanic to feel the structural leverage that usually only millionaires feel when they endow a building.
Oh, I see. It incentivizes action right now, today.
Exactly. It creates a synchronized communal event. But structurally, it also serves as a massive stress test for the town's civic infrastructure.
It's funny you say infrastructure because I always think of infrastructure as roads and bridges. The physical things the city government builds.
That's hard infrastructure. Civic infrastructure is the network of charities, community theaters, food pantries, historical societies, and churches. In a small town, these organizations are the equivalent of keystone species in an ecological system.
Okay, the biologist in me loves this. Explain the keystone species analogy.
In biology, a keystone species is a plant or animal that plays a unique and crucial role in the way an ecosystem functions. Without them, the ecosystem would be dramatically different or just cease to exist altogether.
Like sea otters, right?
Right. Think of sea otters keeping the sea urchin population in check so the kelp forests can survive. In a town, the local food pantry or the after-school arts program are a keystone species. They operate on incredibly fragile shoestring budgets. They are held together by the sheer willpower of exhausted volunteers.
So, if the food pantry collapses, the pressure on the local schools increases because kids come to class hungry, which impacts educational outcomes, which impacts the future workforce. It's an interconnected web.
Precisely. So an event like Match Day is a structural intervention by the community. By pooling that $150,000 match, the town leaders are forcing the citizens to look at this list of 60 keystone organizations and collectively declare, we refuse to let this ecosystem collapse.
Yeah.
It's neighbors saying to neighbors, these organizations aren't just nice amenities, they're the load-bearing walls of our community.
They are holding on to the town. And it builds what we could call a habit of fidelity. When you physically walk into the event center today, or you log online and you allocate your funds, you are teaching the next generation that these institutions do not exist by magic.
They definitely don't.
The Historical Society doesn't just stay open because the universe wills it. It survives because people consistently, actively choose to sustain it.
It's the exact opposite of the escape clause we talked about earlier. It's a communal vow.
That's beautifully said. So for you listening, whether you are having your coffee here in Atchison, or you're driving to work in Wyoming, or walking the dog in London, take a hard look at your own hometown today. What are the keystone institutions in your community that are quietly relying on your fidelity to survive?
Who's keeping the lights on at your local library?
Exactly. Who is stocking the shelves at the crisis center? Because they are the ones holding on to the community, and sometimes they desperately need the community to hold on to them.
And speaking of institutions, we are about to see another massive influx of life into one of this town's oldest ones. The great annual migration is upon us.
It is. The quiet summer streets of Atchison are officially waking up. Looking at the Benedictine College events calendar, ROC Week, that's Raven Orientation Camp, is imminent.
Oh, boy.
Move-in day number 2 hits on August 15th, bringing in the athletes, the cheer team, the band, and the honor students. And then the massive wave, New Student Day, crashes onto campus on August 22.
The logistics of moving thousands of young adults, their terrified parents, and a fleet of minivans packed with mini fridges and futons into a few square miles is staggering. The traffic flow models alone would make an urban planner sweat.
It is a finely tuned machine of rolling carts and cardboard boxes, that's for sure. But beneath the logistics, there is an incredible emotional weight to what is actually happening during move-in week.
It's a profound act of generational trust. Think about the vulnerability required here.
Yeah, handing over your kid.
Parents spend 18 years pouring their entire lives, their resources, and their love into a child. And then on a hot August afternoon, they unload a car, set up a dorm room, hand that child over to an institution, and just drive away.
They are trusting the architecture of the education of Benedictine. They are trusting a promise that dates back to the monks who founded the college, a promise to build the intellectual and moral character of their kids during the most malleable years of their lives. Keep them safe, make them wise.
And letting go of that physical proximity, letting the kids step out from under the immediate roof of the family is never as simple as just unpacking boxes.
No, this is a heavy, bittersweet transition, which actually brings us beautifully to today's Rook comic strip.
The Rook. It always manages to capture these quiet, liminal human moments with such precision.
It really does. For our listeners who might be new to this, Rook is a beautifully drawn comic strip featured on the Chesterton Radio Substack, and occasionally we like to bring the dialogue to life here on the air. Today's strip is titled Last Night at Home.
All right, I'll be the dad here. Let me get into character. Is that everything?
Yep. Bags are packed, boxes are taped, laptop is charged. I am totally ready to conquer sophomore year.
You're sure you don't need to double check? We could review the checklist.
Dad, I've got it.
Yeah.
I'm practically a professional college student now. We hit the road at 7 a.m.
Right. 7 a.m. I'll just stand here in the hallway for another minute just to make sure the suitcases don't try to escape.
Take your time, Dad. They aren't going anywhere tonight.
Ain't that one.
It really hits you right in the chest, doesn't it?
It does, because the dialogue has absolutely nothing to do with bags or checklists. It's about that sudden, arresting realization that the nest is emptying out again.
Exactly.
The daughter is completely oriented toward the future, but the dad just needs one more minute with the present before it irrevocably becomes the past.
That universal one more minute feeling. It's the friction between letting go and holding on.
Huh.
If you want to see the actual visual artistry of that strip, and you really should, the facial expressions convey so much more than just the dialogue. We invite you to view it over on the Chesterton Radio Substack.
You know, if we step back for a moment and look at the spread of stories we've covered this morning, a very distinct pattern emerges regarding that concept of holding on.
Let's trace it.
Yeah.
We started with the gospel, which challenged the Pharisees' desire for a legal escape clause, asking us instead to respect the indestructible architecture of our vows.
Then we looked at Maximilian Kolbe, who demonstrated fidelity at its most absolute and mechanically innovative extreme pooling resources, utilizing massive printing presses and radio waves to broadcast the truth, culminating in the sacrifice of his own life in a bunker.
Then we zoomed into the Atchison community, utilizing the behavioral economics of match day to actively sustain the keystone institutions it refuses to let collapse.
And finally, parents participating in a generational cycle of trust, dropping their children off at a college sustained by faith. And that bittersweet moment in the Rook comic of letting a child step into the future while holding on to the love that binds the family together.
The thread connecting all of these is the distinction between passive belief and active fidelity.
I like that distinction.
Because in our modern digital world, we spend an enormous amount of time and energy arguing over what we believe or what our values are. We debate our beliefs endlessly online. But belief can be completely passive. It costs you nothing to type out a value statement.
Right. I can value the concept of community without ever giving a dime of my money or an hour of my time to support the local food pantry.
Exactly. So perhaps the truer, quieter, and much more difficult question is this. What are you actually willing to remain faithful to? When the structural stress comes, when the matching funds run dry, when the marriage is difficult, when the bunker is dark, what will you not let go of? Fidelity is the active, costly expression of belief.
Belief is what you say. Fidelity is what you do, and the escape clause looks incredibly tempting.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it. And sometimes what we remain faithful to is the simple, quiet magic of a good story. Preserving a piece of art, a method of storytelling that someone, somewhere, thought was just too important to let fade into obscurity.
Which brings us to the featured presentation on the station today, and a brilliant example of a nearly lost art form.
Today's featured program on Chesterton Radio is The Storm. This is a classic 1961 BBC Saturday Night Theater radio drama written by H.L.V. Fletcher. And if you have any appreciation for atmospheric tension and audio engineering, you are in for a treat.
Let me set the psychological board for you without giving away the ending, of course.
The spoilers.
Right. The story centers on a man named James Romford Smith. James is missing a hand from his service in the war, which makes him highly identifiable. And he is currently suspected by the police of a terrible, sensational crime, the murder of his famous actress wife, a crime he vehemently claims he did not commit.
So he is a man actively on the run, desperate to escape the spotlight and the authorities. He wanders into the remote, rugged hills of Wales, but he walks right into a massive historic blizzard. The weather completely dictates his movements, forcing him to seek shelter at an isolated farmhouse.
He is taken in by a young woman named Molly, who lives there with her ailing father, John Mosley, and their farmhand, Jacob. It becomes a classic locked-room mystery, but turned completely inside out by the meteorological conditions.
The blizzard traps them.
Exactly. The blizzard acts as the lock on the door. No one can get in, and no one can leave.
I want to talk about the sound design of this production because it is staggering what the BBC audio engineers were able to accomplish in 1961. Listening to the audio, the howling wind outside and the crackle of the fire inside feel oppressively real.
We really have to remember how Foley art, the reproduction of everyday sound effects for media worked in the analog era of the 1960s. They weren't just clicking a digital sound file labeled blizzard.mp3. They were physically engineering these sounds in a studio in real time.
How do you make a blizzard sound that terrifying inside a dry studio in London?
They used mechanical wind machines. Picture a large, slatted wooden cylinder, almost like a barrel, draped with a heavy piece of canvas or silk. A Foley artist would manually turn a crank to rotate the wooden slats against the canvas. The faster they cranked, the higher and more piercing the howl of the wind became.
That's wild.
Yeah, and they could choreograph the intensity of the storm to match the exact emotional peaks of the dialogue.
That is incredible. And what about the snow itself? There are moments where characters are trudging through the drifts.
The crunching snow is often created by Foley artists rhythmically squeezing a leather pouch filled with cornstarch, or sometimes walking on a shallow tray filled with coarse salt or gravel. It's an auditory illusion created through pure mechanical ingenuity.
And that auditory illusion builds a psychological pressure cooker for the narrative. The dialogue is razor sharp. At first, the fugitive is just Mr. James, a stranded traveler. But soon, Molly starts putting the structural clues together.
Yeah.
The initials on his pajamas. The missing hand. The news reports they heard on the wireless right before the radio battery died. She realizes exactly who is sitting by their fire.
You have this incredible intersection of competing pressures. James is desperate to keep moving, but the weather has trapped him. Molly is terrified she's harboring a killer, but she also finds herself strangely drawn to him.
A lot of tension.
Oh, absolutely. You have the father whose health is failing rapidly, creating a ticking clock for medical help. And then you throw in Palm Morgan, a jealous local farmer who has his eye on Molly and starts getting aggressively suspicious of this stranger.
It forces James into an impossible choice. Does he risk the deadly blizzard to keep running? Or does he stand his ground, face the local suspicion, and try to help this family that took him in, even if it means getting caught? How do you prove your innocence when all the structural evidence points to your guilt?
You know, it really highlights what we've lost with the fade of the Saturday night theater tradition. Back in the 60s, this wasn't just background noise. It was an event. A family would literally sit down together in the living room, dim the lights, and give their undivided attention to a feature-length audio play.
They weren't scrolling on their phones. They weren't multitasking. They were participating in the theater of the mind. When you listen to The Storm, the BBC doesn't show you the snowdrifts or the look of terror on Molly's face. Your brain has to build the sets.
Yeah.
Your imagination has to cast the actors based on the nuances of their vocal performance. It is an active partnership between the storyteller and the listener.
And that kind of focused, imaginative listening builds empathy in a way that passive screen watching rarely does. You're literally constructing the internal world of these characters within your own mind, driven by a canvas wind machine and a pouch of cornstarch.
It is an absolute treasure of a format, and we want to invite you to experience this lost art for yourself. You can listen to the complete, uninterrupted production of The Storm on the Chesterton Radio YouTube channel. Wait until the sun goes down tonight, turn off the overhead lights, and let the blizzard blow into your living room.
Well, the coffee cups are empty, and the morning is getting on.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring us right back to the question we started with, the compass for today. What is worth holding on to?
It's a question that demands a structural inventory of our lives.
It really does. Because holding on to things requires immense strength. Is it a marriage? A vow that feels incredibly heavy right now but was built on a permanent, load-bearing foundation? Is it a local community that needs your matching contribution to keep its keystone institutions from collapsing?
Is it a faith that demands you broadcast light even when you are stripped of all your comforts in the darkest of places? Or is it something as simple as an old radio play, a piece of analog art that somebody somewhere thought was just too beautiful to be thrown away?
It makes you wonder, if you were stranded in a Welsh blizzard like the characters in The Storm, completely cut off from the world, stripped of all your digital distractions and escape clauses, what is the one promise or the one institution you'd actually be worried about keeping alive?
What a provocative thought to leave on. We want to invite all of you to keep this signal alive. The conversation certainly doesn't end here. Continue your exploration with us over on the Chesterton Radio Substack. Check out the Open Door 24/7 live stream and find these classic audio dramas on the Chesterton Radio YouTube channel.
Door to the station is always open.
It is indeed.
From the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas, we are signing off. Remember stories, ideas, wonder. Have a truly wonderful morning, everybody.